Welcome back, everybody. Today we're taking a deep dive into Susan Wise Bauer's The Well-Educated Mind. It's a guide to, well, getting the most out of reading. We'll be talking about how to really unlock those deeper layers of meaning in all sorts of literature. Novels, poetry, you name it.
It really starts with an interesting idea. Anyone, the book argues, can become well-educated just through self-learning.
So you're saying it challenges that idea that you need formal education to really fulfill yourself intellectually.
Exactly.
And that actually ties back to Thomas Jefferson, right? He felt that anyone who could read could educate themselves. And he really pushed for, intense reading and wrestling with difficult concepts to help people and even society grow.
And he didn't pull any punches when it came to criticizing those education systems that prioritize self-expression over, actually grappling with challenging stuff.
Which actually leads right into the author's own background. Bauer talks about her experience in grad school, specifically how those tough reading assignments and those intense Socratic discussions really pushed her and shaped her thinking.
Absolutely. She attributes a lot of her critical thinking skills to those challenges.
Now, the book introduces this concept called the trivium. It's a classic three-stage model of education.
Right. You have the grammar stage first, where it's all about mastering the basics, that solid foundation of knowledge.
Then you move into logic.
Yeah, where the focus shifts to analyzing and evaluating information. It's not just about knowing the what, but also the why behind it.
And finally, you reach the rhetoric stage.
Which is all about applying that knowledge, communicating it effectively, and being able to articulate your own perspective on what you've learned.
So it's like building from the ground up. But the book also gives some very practical techniques for, actually understanding what you read and remembering it.
Oh, absolutely. One big one is active reading. Slowing down, underlining key points, jotting down notes, even questioning the author as you go.
Instead of just passively taking it all in.
Right. It's about really engaging with the material. And another useful tip is summarizing those main points and creating an informal outline to really grasp the structure of what you're reading.
Bauer actually uses a great example from Aristotle to show this in action. She breaks down a super complex passage on, of all things, misdemeanors, to show how you can unlock the meaning of dense writing by really dissecting it.
It's a clever way to illustrate the process.
Now let's get into how we can apply these techniques to different types of writing, starting with novels. Bauer actually gives a quick history of the novel, tracing how it went from being associated with romance, almost looked down on, to eventually earning recognition as a legit literary form.
Yeah, and she guides readers through some key questions to ask themselves when tackling a novel, like who's the central character, what's the most important event, what does the character want, and what's standing in their way, how are they trying to get what they want. And then there's that all-important question of narrative point of view and how it shapes the story.
And she doesn't stop there. The book also pushes us to think about the setting and what it means, the author's writing style, and to really engage in that rhetoric stage we talked about, where you're forming your own opinions and interpretations of the novel's ideas.
It's about taking those thinking skills to the next level.
Then there's the whole world of autobiographies, which are kind of unique because they're inherently subjective.
Right.
They're filtered through the author's own lens, how they see themselves in their past.
Absolutely. And Bauer dives into how Augustine's confessions really shaped a lot of the conventions we see in autobiographies today.
Interesting.
And she offers some key questions to help readers make sense of an autobiography. Like, what's the main theme that ties the whole narrative together? Is the author coming at it from a more spiritual or skeptical perspective? And what are the different layers of meaning at play? The historical, the remembered, and the judged.
It's like peeling back the layers of the onion. So we've talked about novels and autobiographies, but now let's get to a genre that often claims to be like the most objective history.
Yeah, but as Bauer reminds us, history writing has changed a lot over time. The idea of what's true and how objective we can really be is always shifting.
Right, like from those old chronicles to all the postmodern interpretations we see today, how we see and write about the past is constantly evolving.
Yeah.
Which makes critical thinking even more crucial, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
So the book gives us some tools to really evaluate historical narratives, like looking closely at the evidence presented and how the author connected the facts with their interpretations.
Right, and being aware of common pitfalls in historical arguments, like are they using weak evidence, appealing to emotions, or just picking and choosing facts to fit a narrative they already have in mind? It's about being a savvy reader, questioning those assumptions, and remembering that every historical account is ultimately someone's interpretation.
Now let's move on to drama. It's such a unique form of writing because it combines dialogue, action, and stage directions to create this whole experience. But when we're just reading a play, how do we really read it,
It's all about the details. The book suggests really picturing the setting, analyzing how the characters interact and what they say, figuring out the climax and resolution, and of course, thinking about the theme, like what message is the playwright trying to get across.
All right, so now we're getting into a genre that can be super emotionally charged.
Like
Poetry.
Poetry.
Bauer actually encourages us to approach poems with an open mind. Like, first, just experience how it makes you feel before you even try to analyze it.
It's about letting the rhythm and the imagery really wash over you. Reading it aloud can be really powerful, too, to hear how the sounds and words work together.
She even suggests circling phrases or lines that jump out at you, making notes in the margins, even flagging parts that are confusing without giving up. Don't be intimidated by poetry analysis.
Right. It can be daunting, but it's worth it.
And she breaks down some key things to look for, like what type of poem is it? Sonnet, epic, haiku. What's the rhyme scheme? The meter, and how is the poet using imagery, metaphors, and symbols?
It's all about appreciating the craft of poetry, how they use language to create those layers of meaning and evoke emotion.
Now that we've gone over Bauer's general approach to reading, let's look at how those techniques can be applied to some specific works, starting with, well, what many consider the first modern novel, Don Quixote. Have you ever felt like Don Quixote, clinging to an ideal that just doesn't fit in with the world around you?
Well, Don Quixote is about this aging nobleman who's completely obsessed with those chivalric romances. He sets out on these adventures thinking he's in a world of knights and damsels in distress.
But of course, reality has other ideas, and that's what makes the novel so brilliant. It's this constant clash between fantasy and reality.
Exactly. And Cervantes uses humor and satire to show how absurd it is to cling to those outdated ideals when the world's changing around you.
It makes you think, are we holding on to fantasies that blind us to what's real? Are we willing to fight for our ideals, even when they seem impossible?
It's a timeless question.
Speaking of timeless, let's jump ahead a century to another satirical masterpiece, Gulliver's Travels. You've got Lemuel Gulliver, a ship surgeon, who gets shipwrecked on all these bizarre islands.
Each island has this strange, often disturbing society that's basically a commentary on human nature and how messed up our society can be.
Like the Lilliputians, so obsessed with trivial things and those petty political fights, they really highlight how small-minded we can be.
And then there's the Brobdingnagians, those giants who see Gulliver as a tiny plaything. That one really makes you feel our insignificance in the grand scheme of things.
And then you have the Hymenims, these rational horses who rule this super-organized society without all those human vices. They're like this ideal version of reason and virtue.
And then, as a contrast, there are the Yahoos, these crude creatures who embody all our worst instincts. It's like Swift's holding up a mirror to humanity, forcing us to see all our flaws and the absurdity of the systems we create.
It's both hilarious and kind of unsettling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, shifting gears a bit, let's look at a classic American story of self-made success, the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. It's like a blueprint for a well-lived life, packed with all these tips for self-improvement.
He's so meticulous about documenting his journey, outlining how he developed those virtues, improved his writing, and just expanded his knowledge in general. He even had this detailed daily schedule, setting aside specific times for work, study, and reflection.
And what's really refreshing is his honesty and self-awareness. He doesn't shy away from his mistakes, but uses them as learning experiences.
It reminds us that self-education is an ongoing thing, a constant journey of learning and self-discovery.
Now let's dive into some history with the history of the decline and fall of the Roman Empire. Gibbon really traces the whole arc of the empire's decline, looking at all the political, social, and cultural factors that contributed to its collapse.
It's a massive work, but he manages to make it both informative and engaging. He really brings the past to life with these vivid descriptions of emperors, battles, the rise of new religions.
And what's striking is his objectivity. He doesn't get preachy or judgmental, just presents a balanced view of what happened and the key players involved.
He also acknowledges the limitations of historical knowledge. He knows that the past is often murky and open to interpretation.
Let's step into the world of drama with Hamlet now. It's a timeless masterpiece that digs into revenge, betrayal, madness, and the whole question of what it means to exist.
Shakespeare really captures Hamlet's inner turmoil as he wrestles with his father's murder, his mother's quick remarriage, and just the overall corruption of the court.
And those famous soliloquies, they're like windows into his soul, laying bare his grief, doubt, and the weight of what he feels responsible for.
And Shakespeare's language, the imagery, the metaphors, the wordplay, it creates this tapestry of beauty and depth.
Every line feels like it has multiple layers of meaning. And then, of course, there's that tragic ending where Hamlet's quest for revenge ultimately destroys him and leaves everyone around him in ruins.
It's a powerful reminder of how we humans are capable of both greatness and self-destruction.
Now, for a poem that can be challenging, but so rewarding, The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. This one captures the fragmented and disillusioned feeling of the world after World War I.
Yeah, it's like a collage of images, voices, and myths, reflecting that shattered world that emerged from the war. Eliot uses all these literary and historical references, creating this sense of despair, but also a longing for some kind of spiritual renewal.
Those opening lines, "April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land," really set that tone of desolation and how nature seems indifferent to all the suffering going on.
And Eliot's use of multiple voices emphasizes how fractured modern life feels. You hear from characters like Marie, who's haunted by memories of a lost love, and Tiresias, a blind prophet who's witnessed centuries of human folly.
It's like Eliot's holding up a broken mirror to society, showing its brokenness and emptiness. But then there's that glimmer of hope in the last lines. Shanti, 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 the Sanskrit word for peace.
It's a reminder that even in despair, the human spirit can endure and find meaning, even in a broken world.
Okay, our last stop on this part of the journey takes us to Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. It's a groundbreaking novel that explores what it means to be black in America.
It follows this unnamed narrator, a young black man who's trying to figure out who he is in a society that basically makes him invisible.
It's a powerful indictment of racism, prejudice, and social injustice. And Ellison blends realism with surrealism to create this world that's both familiar and disorienting.
Right. The narrator's journey starts with this humiliating experience at this white-sponsored event where he's made to fight other black boys blindfolded. It's such a powerful image of the dehumanization he faces.
And later, he joins this political organization called the Brotherhood, but eventually realizes they're just using him. It highlights the limitations of ideology and the danger of blindly following any group.
Which raises a big question for all of us. How can we avoid becoming invisible in our own lives? How can we make our voices heard and our experiences recognized?
In the end, the narrator retreats underground, trying to find refuge from a world that refuses to see him for who he really is.
Invisible Man is a powerful critique of racism and a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It challenges us to confront our own biases and to try to see the world through the eyes of those who are often marginalized and silenced.
So we've talked about different genres and we've delved into specific works, but what about when those two things come together? When history meets drama on the stage, it's like you're transported back in time, experiencing those historical events through the eyes of the people who lived through them.
Right. It's a way to connect with history on a much more personal level, to understand the motivations and the conflicts that shaped the past.
Let's start with a restoration comedy, The Way of the World by William Congreve. It's set in 17th century England, and it really dives into the social scene and all the moral complexities of that time. Love, wit, those games people play when they're trying to get married or climb the social ladder.
The dialogue is brilliant, the characters are larger than life, and the plot twists and turns in all these unexpected ways. But beneath all that light-hearted banter, Congreve is exploring these deeper themes about gender roles, power dynamics, and societal expectations.
He really captures that hypocrisy and social maneuvering of the upper classes, like with Mirabelle and Millamant, using wit and elaborate schemes to navigate love and marriage in this world where reputation is everything.
It gives you a real glimpse into a time when social standing was everything.
Now let's fast forward a few centuries to George Bernard Shaw's St. Joan. It's a reimagining of Joan of Arc's story.
Oh, St. Joan, a classic.
Shaw portrays Joan as this visionary, this charismatic leader who's completely driven by her belief in her divine mission.
And she's also a woman way ahead of her time. She challenges the patriarchal systems of both the church and the state.
It's her conviction and her defiance that ultimately lead to her being condemned as a heretic, which raises some big questions about the price of integrity and the danger of just blindly following orders.
Shaw's play isn't just a historical drama. It's also a commentary on heroism, on faith, and on that clash between individual conscience and what society expects of you.
It's a good reminder that those who challenge the status quo, they often face serious consequences.
Sadly, that's often the case.
Now, for something a little more contemporary, let's look at Man for All Seasons by Robert Bolt. It's a play about Sir Thomas More.
A fascinating figure.
It's all about conscience, integrity, and that struggle between what you believe in and what's politically convenient.
Right. More is portrayed as this man of principle, willing to sacrifice everything for what he believes is right.
He has this impossible choice to make: betray his conscience or stay true to his faith and face the consequences.
It's a struggle that still resonates today, showing how important it is to have that personal integrity, especially when you're facing pressure to conform or give in to those in power.
A Man for All Seasons reminds us that sometimes real heroism is about those quiet acts of defiance, that unwavering commitment to your principles even when it's hard.
It's a powerful message.
As we wrap up our deep dive into the well-educated mind, it's clear that reading can be such a transformative experience.
By engaging with all these different texts, we haven't just learned new things, we've also sharpened our critical thinking skills, broadened our perspectives, and come to a deeper understanding of what it means to be human.
This book, it gives you the tools and the inspiration to keep exploring literature, to engage with those great thinkers, and to just cultivate that love of learning that lasts a lifetime.
It's just the beginning. There's a whole world of literature out there waiting to be discovered.
So, to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to pick up a copy of The Well-Educated Mind. The link is in the show notes. Dive in and continue that journey of learning. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more deep dives like this one. And share this episode with your friends. Help them expand their minds and embark on their own literary adventures. Until next time, happy reading.